everyone. In this episode of Site Spotlight, we're looking at coinlaw.io, an online resource for financial and crypto information. And the site was founded in 2024 and is privately owned by Barry Elad. Our review focuses on our first impression of the site and that it makes, and the tags, the categories, and its tone of voice, and how to open the site up to a broader audience. My name is Iris Gulle and I'm joined by Taco Verdonschot. And are you ready to talk finance and crypto?
I must admit that I'm not the biggest fan of crypto, but I'm really curious to see what this site's all about.
Me too. So if you're new to our series, don't worry. We'll keep this honest and actionable. And if you're a website owner, feel free to steal these ideas for your own site too, or submit your site for Site Spotlight. So I would say, let's dive in.
Yeah, let's go.
One of the first things I noticed and really liked is how the current everything feels. You've got article data for today, which is huge in the crypto and finance world where things move so fast. It shows that the site is actively being monitored and it's alive. And I also want to highlight your categorization, the way the menu at the top and the footer break everything down into pillars like cryptocurrency, compliance, and insurance. That is very professional, and it makes a massive amount of complex data feel organized and manageable right from the jump. In high-stake niches like this, it's what Google calls your money or your life content. Trust is everything, and you have these incredible assets like your 18 plus years of experience and a really clear mission statement, but they're buried at the very bottom of the page. If you can scroll down a little bit, Taco, recommend moving the condensed version of this because I do think this is pretty broad. We can move a little bit more at the top and have it called like expert insights or your founder bio be much higher. So whether it's in the sidebar or right on the hero section, you want to help the visitors see the who is doing this and why they're doing this before they start reading the technical content and seeing who's curating this content, which might help with your credibility.
Yeah, and that's what you're saying. If you have a website like this, then credibility is really important, right?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of AI generated, little bit of kind of spammy sites, as I would call them. And your experience, Barry, in this case, is very helpful and important and distinguishable.
Let's get technical. First, we have to talk about cookies. Because since May 26, 2011, websites have been required to get permission to set cookies. Well, if the company is European or if the visitors or target audience is residing in Europe. Since 2018, this has become even stricter with the GDPR. Basically, if your website has visitors from the EU, you have to comply with these European rules. And that's why so many sites have a cookie banner or a consent pop-up when they set non-functional cookies. Coinlaw.io is available from Europe, and there is no indication that their target audience isn't in the EU. And it doesn't have a consent banner or pop-up. However, it does set analytics cookies, for example, Google Analytics, and a tracking cookie from AdSense. As you can see, when we look at the cookie set when you join the site. Now, that seems to be a direct violation of the EU cookie law. The next thing we have to talk about are tags and categories. Because tags in WordPress are nothing like tags on social media, for example on Instagram. Every tag in WordPress creates several new URLs, which quickly increases the number of URLs crawlers can or have to visit on your site. Luckily, at coinlaw.io, they understand that, and they use tags and categories sparingly, the right way. Category pages also have a blob of unique content. Let me show that when we go to the blog. We have some latest news here. This is in the cryptocurrency. If we click there, you can see that the whole cryptocurrency has its own description and then the articles that relate to cryptocurrency. So this is really well done. It makes them more than just a single aggregation page that lists a bunch of blog posts. And this shows the site owner clearly knows what he's doing. All right, we have to talk about site speed. There's a nice tool by Google. It's called PageSpeed Insights that you can use to test the speed and the perceived speed of your website. Now, what we see here in the top section is that it's looking quite okay for mobile users. And this part is based on the real-world visits in the last 28 days. So your users have a pretty good experience, although the time to first byte is a tad slow and the first contentful paint could be faster. But if we look at the tests that Google themselves run, which do not have the real world examples but are the benchmark, then we can see that there's quite a bit of slowness overall. And this can be caused by an initial slow response from your server. It's called time to first byte. And that is basically the time the user has to wait to get the first piece of data after the initial request. And there are many potential causes for this, and most of them we can't see from the outside. What we do know is that in WordPress, the time to first byte performance is impacted by the number and, more importantly, the quality of plugins or what themes are used. Running your site on a host capable of handling the traffic you're sending to it and using a CDN like Cloudflare usually has a very positive impact on your time to first byte as well. Smart caching and avoiding redirects are also ways to positively influence your time to first byte. Good luck investigating what's happening on your site. Well, what we can see is that there's room for improvement.
Okay, so one thing that really stands out is how well your headlines are optimized for the search engines, and your rankings probably benefit from that a lot as well. However, I noticed some phrases like secrets exposed or shocking data, and they're appearing quite often, as we can see. And while those are great for getting clicks, they're very clickbaity. They can sometimes feel a little bit more like a tabloid style, a little bit over exaggerated. So since you're focusing on being a source for accurate analysis, it might be worth shifting towards a more authoritative, professional tone. So for example, instead of saying explosive trends exposed now, you could try something like key 2026 crowdfunding trends, a data-driven analysis. This keeps your keywords intact on the one hand and makes your site feel a little bit more high-level industry report that people can really trust. As we can see right now, the homepage is essentially a long list of headlines and dates. So you mentioned that the goal of the site is to bridge the gap between complex data and accessible information. So a win for your user experience would be adding a short summary or text under those headlines. As we said before, just a single sentence explaining the why behind the story makes a huge difference. And it adds value immediately and encourages people to engage deeper with your articles so they know exactly what they're clicking.
Speaking of engaging with articles, I saw that there is a ticker here or a thing that auto scrolls.
Yeah.
Is that a good idea?
We wouldn't recommend doing this. I think it's better to select and then having this for UX purposes scroll by. But no, not my cup of tea. So looking as your site as a whole, it's clear that you have all the data you need. You have all the posts. It's also, for me now, it's more about finding a signature voice. You've built the bones of a really great information hub, but to take it to the next level, I think the site needs to move away from looking like a data repository and more towards looking like a professional news agency on this topic. So it's taking all the raw information and wrapping it in a professional expert narrative that's going to make it look a lot better.
Having a great website is very important. Having good content, having a fast website, it all matters. But your visitors need to be able to actually interact with the site for it to be useful. And so accessibility is a huge part of building a good website. One of the things that I want to talk about today are heading levels, because websites are a bit like books. And just like a book, a web page should have just one title, clear headings, and maybe even subheadings to clarify the text structure. In HTML, the markup language of websites, we're calling those headings H1 through H6, where H1 is the top level, your title basically, and H6 is the lowest level. Page should have only one H1 level heading, but it can have multiple of the others. However, for a semantically correct page, no level should be skipped. So, an H1 level heading should be followed by an H2 level heading, and an H2 level heading should be followed by an H3 level heading. On coinlaw.io, and you can see it in the tool that I've now enabled for this site, you can see that this is done pretty well. There's one title, the H1, and then there's the H2 and H3 below that. And there's multiple H2s, which is absolutely fine, and there's multiple H3s, which is also fine. So this is a well-structured page.
Nicely done.
Now, the other thing that we have to talk about when we're talking about websites is contrast. The other thing I want to talk about today is contrast. Did you know that 1 in 12 men is colorblind? This means that they have a different perception of color than most of us do. In many cases, it means that text with a low contrast ratio to its background can't be read by them. And this doesn't just go for colorblind men. It's also quite important for people watching your site in suboptimal conditions, like outside in the sun on their phone. So when we look at coinlaw.io, we can see that most of the site is a black text on a white background. And that is absolutely solid. That's the best contrast you can get. In most other places, contrast also done really well. Even with the highlights, that is absolutely clear. There are some minor places like the S featured in that do not have sufficient contrast. But those are not the key elements of your site. So overall, really well done on coinlaw.io. Now, the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to accessibility is keyboard accessibility. Because not everyone can use a keyboard and a mouse. So, your site should also be usable using just the keyboard. This is what we call keyboard accessibility. The quickest way to test this is by navigating to a page and by just using the tab key to navigate through the page. On coinlaw.io, you'll see that we first get 2 invisible links. And let me go back to the home page and show you what I mean. So if we go to the page and we hit the tab button, you can see the square in the top.
Yeah.
I'm using my mouse now to highlight it, but you don't see anything. In reality, there is something there, but it's hard for me to show. But that is because the text color is exactly the same as the background color.
Yeah.
Now, this happens again with a different link. Those are very useful links for screen reader users because they allow you to skip immediately to the main content and to the menu so that you don't have to tap your way through the site entirely. So it's absolutely useful, except that we can't see which is which. So I'm not sure now what I'm focusing on. So that's a minor improvement, but it definitely needs some attention. Overall, if we tap through the site, it becomes, now we see we're on the menu. You see the little highlight bars next to latest news. That goes to statistics, about, and contact. Now, let's say that we want to see about the latest news. When I am on the latest news, let me tap there again, and I hit enter, or I hit spacebar. Well, spacebar, I scroll down all the way. That's not what we meant. When I hit enter, the menu opens for a very brief moment, and then immediately takes me to a page. So there's no way for me, without using my mouse, to actually see this menu and navigate this menu. That's definitely something that needs improvement. And with that, we've reached the end of this episode of Site Spotlight, where we reviewed coinlaw.io, a site that gives you information on finance and crypto. If you want your site to be reviewed as well, make sure you go to progressplanner.com/site-spotlight and sign up. And we'd love to spotlight your site. See ya!
Bye.
And with